The emergency alarm pierced through the relative quiet of the Airfield Operations Center as Captain Maria Rodriguez grabbed her flight helmet and sprinted toward her helicopter. 3 hours had passed since the insertion, and the call she had been expecting finally came through the radio with urgent intensity. Black Hawk 77, immediate scramble for emergency extraction. The operations officer's voice crackled through her headset. Fury 6 is requesting immediate pickup. Heavy contact, multiple casualties, extraction under fire authorized. Rodriguez felt her stomach tighten as she processed the message. Emergency extraction under fire was one of the most dangerous operations any helicopter crew could attempt, especially in mountainous terrain where escape routes were limited and enemy forces could position themselves with clear fields of fire. Chief Warrant Officer Michael Torres was already in the cockpit running through emergency startup procedures as Rodriguez climbed into the pilot's seat. His hands moved with practiced efficiency across the instrument panel, bringing the aircraft's systems online much faster than normal startup protocols would typically allow. "How bad is it?" Torres asked as he monitored the engine temperatures and hydraulic pressures that would determine whether they could depart immediately or need to wait for the systems to fully initialize. "Unknown at this time," Rodriguez replied while strapping herself into her seat and connecting her communications equipment. "All we know is that they're taking heavy fire and have casualties." Master Sergeant Vega wouldn't call for emergency extraction unless the situation was critical. Staff Sergeant Tommy Chun and Sergeant First Class David Washington had already completed their emergency pre-flight inspections and were securing additional ammunition for the door guns. Both men understood that this flight would likely involve sustained combat operations, requiring every round they could carry. The helicopter's turbine engines reached full power as Rodriguez lifted off from the airfield without waiting for tower clearance. Emergency protocols gave her priority over all other air traffic, and every second counted when soldiers were fighting for their lives in hostile territory. "Control, this is Black Hawk 77 departing emergency extraction mission," she transmitted as they climbed away from the base. "Request immediate clearance to grid coordinates previously filed. Maximum speed authorized." The response came back immediately from the Air Traffic Control Center. "Black Hawk 77, you are cleared for emergency extraction mission. All aircraft in your flight path have been diverted. Godspeed, and bring our boys home." Torres programmed their navigation system for the fastest possible route to the extraction site, while Rodriguez pushed the aircraft to its maximum sustainable speed. The mountains seemed to rush toward them as they covered the distance that had taken nearly 30 minutes during their earlier insertion flight, in just over 15 minutes. 10 minutes to extraction site, Torres announced as he monitored their progress and fuel consumption. "Weather conditions have deteriorated since our morning flight. We're looking at 40-knot crosswinds and possible downdrafts in the target area." Rodriguez acknowledged the weather report while mentally preparing for what promised to be the most challenging flight of her career. Extracting soldiers under fire required hovering in a stationary position while enemy forces directed all available weapons at the helicopter. The narrow ledge that had barely accommodated their landing that morning would now be even more difficult to reach with wounded soldiers who might need medical attention. The radio crackled to life with Morrison's voice transmitting from the mountain battlefield. "Black Hawk 77, this is Fury 6. We have secured the primary objective, but are taking heavy fire from reinforced enemy positions. We have 2 urgent casualties requiring immediate medical evacuation." Rodriguez felt a chill run down her spine as she processed the casualty report. 2 urgent casualties meant soldiers with life-threatening injuries who would die without immediate medical treatment. The pressure to get them out quickly would have to be balanced against the need to ensure the helicopter could survive long enough to complete the extraction. "Fury 6, this is Black Hawk 77, she transmitted back. "We are 5 minutes from your position. Prepare for extraction under fire. Mark your position with infrared strobes and be ready to move wounded personnel immediately upon landing." The Taliban stronghold came into view as they crested the final ridge before the extraction site. Rodriguez could see smoke rising from multiple locations throughout the cave complex, evidence of the fierce battle that had been raging for the past 3 hours. Muzzle flashes were visible from numerous positions as enemy fighters continued to engage the Special Forces team. Contact, multiple locations. Washington reported from his position at the door gun. I count at least 20 active firing positions between us and the extraction site. They've got the landing zone covered from 3 directions. Rodriguez began her descent toward the narrow ledge while Torres called out airspeed and altitude readings that would help her maintain control in the turbulent mountain air. The helicopter shuddered as it encountered the severe crosswinds that Torres had predicted, requiring constant corrections to maintain their flight path. The sound of gunfire intensified as enemy forces realized the helicopter was returning for extraction. Bullets struck the aircraft's armored hull with metallic pings that reminded Rodriguez just how vulnerable they were to ground fire. One lucky shot to a critical component could end their mission and doom the soldiers they were trying to rescue. Taking fire from 11 o'clock, Chen reported as he returned fire with his machine gun. Looks like they've repositioned since this morning. I'm seeing heavy weapons positions that weren't there during the insertion. Master Sergeant Vega's voice came through the radio as Rodriguez began her final approach to the extraction site. Black Hawk 77. We are moving wounded personnel to the pickup zone now. Enemy forces are concentrating fire on our position, but we can hold them for 2 minutes maximum. Rodriguez could see the Special Forces team moving across the rocky terrain toward the landing zone, with several soldiers carrying their wounded comrades on improvised stretchers. The sight of injured Americans strengthened her resolve to get them out safely, regardless of the risks involved. The helicopter touched down on the narrow ledge with the same precision Rodriguez had demonstrated during the morning insertion, but this time enemy fire was concentrated on their position from the moment they became stationary. The aircraft shook under the impact of numerous bullets striking the fuselage and rotor system. Go, go, go! Vega shouted as his men began loading the wounded soldiers into the helicopter's passenger compartment. The 2 casualties were quickly secured by Chun and Washington, who immediately began providing first aid while the rest of the team climbed aboard. Rodriguez fought to keep the helicopter stable on the precarious ledge as enemy gunfire increased in intensity. She could hear bullets striking the aircraft's vital systems and wondered how much damage they could sustain before losing the ability to fly. The engine temperature gauges showed readings that were approaching dangerous levels as rounds struck the cooling systems. 30 seconds, Torres called out as he monitored their fuel consumption and system status. Hovering under fire was consuming fuel at an alarming rate, and they needed enough remaining to reach the nearest medical facility where the wounded soldiers could receive proper treatment. Sergeant Williams, the team sniper, was providing covering fire from his position near the helicopter as the rest of the team completed their boarding procedures. His accurate shooting was forcing enemy fighters to take cover, reducing the volume of fire directed at the aircraft during the critical loading phase. All personnel on board, Vega reported as he climbed into the helicopter and secured the passenger compartment door. We're ready for immediate departure. Rodriguez pulled power and lifted the helicopter away from the ledge as quickly as the aircraft's performance would allow. The wounded soldiers needed immediate medical attention, making speed more important than the tactical considerations that had governed their earlier flights. The sound of gunfire faded as they climbed away from the extraction site, but Torres was already identifying system malfunctions that had resulted from the enemy fire they had taken. Several warning lights were illuminated on the instrument panel, indicating damage to critical components that could affect their ability to reach a medical facility. We've got problems, Torres announced grimly. Hydraulic pressure is dropping, engine temperature is climbing, and I'm showing damage to the tail rotor system. We need to get these wounded soldiers to medical care immediately, but I'm not sure how much longer this bird is going to stay airborne. Rodriguez evaluated their options while maintaining control of the increasingly difficult helicopter. The nearest medical facility was still 15 minutes away at maximum speed, but their damaged aircraft might not be able to maintain that pace. Landing short of their destination could mean the difference between life and death for the wounded soldiers. Chen's voice came through the internal communications system as he worked to stabilize the casualties in the passenger compartment. Captain, both wounded soldiers are in critical condition. One has taken shrapnel to the chest and is having difficulty breathing. The other has severe leg wounds with significant blood loss. They need surgical intervention within the next 20 minutes. The pressure mounted as Rodriguez pushed the damaged helicopter toward the medical facility while Torres monitored systems that were rapidly degrading from the battle damage they had sustained. Every minute that passed reduced their chances of reaching their destination while increasing the likelihood that the wounded soldiers would not survive their injuries. Medical base. This is Black Hawk 77 declaring emergency, Rodriguez transmitted as they approached the facility. 2 urgent casualties on board. Aircraft sustained battle damage. Request immediate landing clearance, and medical team standing by. The response was immediate and professional. Black Hawk 77, you are cleared for emergency landing. Medical teams are standing by at the landing zone. Fire and rescue equipment is also positioned in case of aircraft emergency. Rodriguez felt a sense of relief as the medical facility came into view, knowing that they had successfully completed one of the most dangerous missions of her career. The helicopter was barely flying, but they had managed to extract all 12 Special Forces soldiers and were delivering the wounded to medical care that could save their lives. The landing was rough due to the damage sustained by the aircraft, but Rodriguez managed to set the helicopter down safely as medical personnel rushed to meet them. Chun and Washington helped transfer the wounded soldiers to the waiting stretchers while Vega coordinated with the medical teams to ensure proper handoff of patient information. As the medical teams rushed the casualties toward the hospital facility, Rodriguez shut down the damaged engines and completed her emergency landing checklist. The helicopter would require extensive repairs before flying again, but it had performed its mission flawlessly despite taking significant enemy fire. Vega approached Rodriguez as she climbed out of the cockpit, his face showing the exhaustion and stress of the day's operations. Despite the dangers they had faced, his expression also reflected satisfaction at having completed a mission that would significantly impact enemy operations throughout the region. "Captain, I cannot thank you and your crew enough," Vega said with genuine emotion. "Your flying today saved the lives of my wounded soldiers and allowed us to gather intelligence that will prevent countless future attacks on our forces." The Taliban command center we destroyed was coordinating operations across 3 provinces. Rodriguez nodded while surveying the damage to her helicopter. Bullet holes were visible throughout the fuselage, and hydraulic fluid was leaking from several damaged systems. The aircraft would need weeks of repairs before returning to service, but it had accomplished something far more important than its own survival. Torres joined them as maintenance crews began assessing the extent of the battle damage. His calm professionalism had been instrumental in their success, and Rodriguez knew that his steady voice and expert flying skills had made the difference between mission success and disaster. "The wounded soldiers are stable," Chun reported as he returned from the medical facility. "Both are going to make full recoveries thanks to the medical attention they received." The mission was a complete success from every perspective. As Rodriguez reflected on the events of the day, she realized that they had participated in something much larger than a simple helicopter insertion and extraction. The intelligence gathered by Vega's team would reshape coalition operations throughout the region, while the destruction of the Taliban command center would disrupt enemy activities for months or years to come. The bold helicopter insertion that had begun 12 hours earlier had indeed turned the tide in the combat zone, proving once again that courage, skill, and determination could overcome seemingly impossible odds. The success belonged not just to the helicopter crew or the Special Forces team, but to every person who had contributed to making the mission possible. Standing beside her damaged but victorious aircraft, Rodriguez knew that this day would be remembered as one of the defining moments of their deployment, when a small group of American soldiers demonstrated the values and capabilities that made their military the finest fighting force in the world. Master Sergeant Carlos Vega pressed his back against the cold mountain rock, feeling the vibration of helicopter rotors fading into the distance as Captain Rodriguez and her crew disappeared behind the ridge line. The insertion had gone perfectly, but now came the hard part. 12 men were alone on a hostile mountain face, surrounded by an unknown number of enemy fighters who were already beginning to react to their presence. The sound of AK 47 fire echoed across the rocky terrain as Taliban fighters emerged from concealed positions throughout the cave complex. Vega could see muzzle flashes from at least 6 different locations, indicating that the enemy force was larger than intelligence estimates had suggested. The mission parameters had anticipated 15 to 20 fighters, but the volume of fire suggested they were facing closer to 30 or 40 armed combatants. Sergeant First Class Jake Morrison, Vega's communications specialist, quickly established contact with the command post while taking cover behind a boulder the size of a small car. His radio equipment had survived the insertion intact, giving the team their vital link to supporting forces and extraction coordination. Overwatch Base, this is Fury 6, Morrison whispered into his handset. Insertion complete, team in position. Enemy contact immediate. Estimate 40+ fighters in the cave complex. Beginning movement toward primary objective. The response came back through static and the distant sound of gunfire. Fury 6, this is Overwatch Base. Copy your situation report. Close air support is standing by. Call sign Hammer 2-1. Proceed with mission as planned. Extraction window opens in 4 hours. Vega signaled to his team leaders, Staff Sergeants Marcus Johnson and Robert Kim, who had positioned their 6-man elements on either side of the main approach to the cave system. Both men were veteran Special Forces operators with multiple combat deployments, and their calm professionalism was evident even under fire. Johnson, a demolitions expert from South Carolina, had already identified several potential breach points in the enemy defensive positions. His weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency as he prepared explosive charges that could clear pathways through the rocky terrain if needed. The sound of enemy gunfire seemed to have no effect on his concentration as he worked. Kim, a former ranger who had earned his Special Forces tab after 3 tours in Iraq, was studying the cave entrances through high-powered binoculars. His tactical mind was already calculating approach routes and potential ambush sites as he observed enemy movement patterns among the rocks. 6. This is Johnson, came the voice through Vega's earpiece. I count 7 cave entrances from this position, with active fighting positions at 4 of them. The main entrance appears to be reinforced with sandbags and possibly concrete barriers. We're going to need explosives to breach that position effectively. Vega acknowledged the report while scanning the terrain ahead through his rifle scope. The Taliban had chosen their position well, with natural choke points that would force any attacking force into predetermined kill zones. The cave system provided them with protection from airstrikes while offering multiple escape routes if the position became untenable. Specialist Tommy Park, the team's youngest member and their technology expert, was working with a small drone that would provide aerial surveillance of the enemy positions. Despite being only 22 years old, Park had already demonstrated exceptional skill in electronic warfare and reconnaissance during their previous operations. The drone lifted silently from behind their position, its cameras beginning to transmit real-time footage of the Taliban stronghold. The images revealed a complex network of tunnels and fortified positions that extended much deeper into the mountain than satellite imagery had indicated. Sir, you need to see this, Park said quietly, showing Vega the drone's display screen. The cave system is much larger than we thought. I'm detecting heat signatures indicating at least 50 people inside the mountain, possibly more. There are multiple levels connected by tunnels, and it looks like they've got supply caches and living quarters established throughout the complex. Vega studied the images with growing concern. The mission had been planned based on intelligence suggesting a relatively small enemy force occupying a limited cave system. Instead, they were facing what appeared to be a major Taliban stronghold that could house hundreds of fighters and serve as a regional command center. The sound of incoming mortar rounds whistled through the air as the enemy began targeting their positions with indirect fire. The explosions sent showers of rock fragments across the mountainside, forcing the Special Forces team to seek better cover among the scattered boulders and crevices. "Contact left," shouted Sergeant Tim Williams, one of Kim's team members, as a group of Taliban fighters attempted to flank their position by moving through a series of narrow ledges carved into the mountain face. Williams, a sniper from Montana, engaged the enemy fighters with precision fire from his rifle, forcing them back into cover. The intensity of the firefight increased as more enemy personnel joined the battle from concealed positions throughout the cave system. Vega realized that his team was facing a much larger and better organized force than anticipated, but retreat was not an option. The intelligence value of the target had increased dramatically with the discovery of the extensive tunnel network. Morrison established contact with the close air support aircraft circling high above the battlefield. Hammer 2-1, this is Fury 6. We need immediate air support on grid coordinates I'm about to transmit. Multiple enemy positions in cave complex, approximately 50 fighters confirmed. The response from the F-16 pilot was immediate and professional. Fury 6, this is Hammer 2-1. I have your position marked and am observing enemy fire from multiple locations. Stand by for danger close air support. Recommend you mark your positions with infrared strobes. Each team member activated their infrared identification strobes, creating markers that would be visible to the pilot's night vision equipment, but invisible to the naked eye. The system would allow the aircraft to deliver precision strikes without risking friendly casualties, even at close range. Vega coordinated with his team leaders as they prepared to advance toward the main cave entrance under cover of the airstrike. The plan required precise timing and flawless execution, as they would be moving through terrain that offered limited cover while enemy fighters attempted to stop their progress. Johnson, I need you to breach the main entrance as soon as the airstrike hits, Vega commanded through his radio. Kim, take your team around the right flank and secure those secondary tunnels. We cannot let them escape through the back exits. The sound of the F-16's engines grew louder as the pilot began his attack run. The aircraft streaked across the mountain peaks at tremendous speed, its targeting systems locked onto the enemy positions that Park's drone had identified moments earlier. The first bomb struck the mountainside with devastating effect, sending a massive shockwave across the rocky terrain. The explosion collapsed one of the main cave entrances and eliminated several fighting positions that had been directing fire at the Special Forces team. Smoke and dust filled the air as secondary explosions indicated that ammunition stores inside the caves had been hit. Move, 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 Vega shouted as his men emerged from cover and began their assault on the remaining enemy positions. The airstrike had stunned the Taliban fighters and provided the window of opportunity needed to close the distance to their objective. Johnson led his team toward the main cave entrance, carrying explosive charges and breaching equipment. Despite the chaos of the battle, his movements were deliberate and controlled as he approached the fortified position that controlled access to the tunnel system. Kim's team moved with equal precision as they advanced on the secondary entrances, using the rocky terrain to mask their approach from enemy observers. The coordination between the two elements was the result of countless hours of training and the trust that comes from fighting together in previous operations. Sergeant Williams provided overwatch from an elevated position, his sniper rifle eliminating enemy fighters who attempted to engage the advancing teams. His calm voice provided tactical updates through the radio as he observed the battlefield from his vantage point among the rocks. 6. This is Williams. I have eyes on approximately 12 fighters attempting to escape through the eastern tunnel complex. They're carrying what appears to be documents and computer equipment. Recommend immediate action to prevent their departure. Vega acknowledged the report while leading his command element toward the main objective. The presence of computers and documents confirmed that this was indeed a significant enemy command center, making their mission even more critical to ongoing operations throughout the region. The sound of explosions echoed through the mountain as Johnson's breaching charges cleared the entrance to the main cave system. Smoke poured from the opening as the demolitions expert signaled that the pathway was clear for the assault team to enter. Breach successful, Johnson reported. Entrance is clear, but I'm detecting movement deeper in the tunnel system. Recommend immediate entry before they can reorganize their defenses. Vega led his men into the cave system, their night vision equipment revealing a sophisticated network of tunnels and chambers that extended far into the mountain. The walls showed evidence of months or years of preparation, with electrical lighting, ventilation systems, and storage areas that indicated this was a permanent installation rather than a temporary hideout. The team moved through the tunnels with practiced efficiency, clearing each chamber and securing any intelligence materials they encountered. Park's technical expertise proved invaluable as he quickly identified computer equipment and communication systems that would provide crucial information about enemy operations throughout the region. "Sir, this is incredible," Park whispered as he examined a sophisticated radio setup that was still transmitting. "They've got communication links to Taliban units across 3 provinces. This isn't just a local stronghold. It's a regional command center coordinating operations across hundreds of square miles." The discovery confirmed Vega's growing suspicion that they had stumbled upon something much larger than a simple Taliban hideout. The complex represented a significant enemy capability that could affect coalition operations for months or years if left intact. Morrison maintained contact with the command post as they continued their advance through the tunnel system. "Overwatch Base, this is Fury 6. We have penetrated the main complex and are securing significant intelligence materials. Request additional time for complete exploitation of the site." The response from headquarters reflected the importance of their discovery. "Fury 6, this is Overwatch Base. Your mission is now classified as Priority Alpha. Take all time necessary to secure intelligence materials. Additional support assets are being diverted to your location." The team continued deeper into the mountain, discovering ammunition stockpiles, communication equipment, and document storage areas that revealed the true scope of the Taliban operation. Each new chamber provided more evidence that this complex had served as a critical hub for enemy activities throughout the region. As they worked to secure the intelligence materials, Vega couldn't help but reflect on the courage and skill that had brought them to this point. Captain Rodriguez and her crew had delivered them precisely where they needed to be, despite the significant risks involved in the insertion. Now it was up to his team to make the most of the opportunity and gather intelligence that could save countless lives in future operations. The sound of distant gunfire reminded them that the battle was far from over, and extraction would present its own set of challenges. But, for now, they had achieved their primary objective and were in the process of gathering intelligence that would reshape their understanding of enemy capabilities in the region. The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty airfield as Captain Maria Rodriguez checked her watch for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. The sound of rotor blades cutting through the hot Afghan air had become as familiar to her as her own heartbeat over the past 8 months. But today felt different. Today, everything they had trained for would be put to the ultimate test. Standing beside her UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter, Rodriguez watched as her crew performed their final pre-flight checks. Staff Sergeant Tommy Chun, her crew chief, ran his hands along the aircraft's exterior with the careful attention of a surgeon examining a patient. Sergeant First Class David Washington, her door gunner, meticulously inspected his M240 machine gun, ensuring every component was properly secured and ready for action. The briefing had been clear, but sobering. Intelligence reports indicated that a Taliban stronghold in the Karangal Valley had been planning a major offensive against coalition forces. The enemy had fortified themselves in a series of caves and bunkers carved into the mountainside, making traditional ground assaults nearly impossible. Airstrikes had proven ineffective due to the natural rock formations that provided excellent protection from above. The mission was straightforward in concept but terrifyingly complex in execution. Rodriguez and her crew would insert a 12-man special forces team directly into the heart of enemy territory, allowing the soldiers to establish a forward operating position and call in precision strikes from within the Taliban stronghold. The insertion point was a narrow ledge barely large enough for the helicopter to hover, surrounded by peaks that rose nearly 3,000 feet above sea level. Lieutenant Colonel James Harrison, the mission commander, approached Rodriguez with a grim expression. His weathered face told the story of countless operations in hostile territory, and the slight limp he carried served as a permanent reminder of an IED explosion that had nearly ended his career 2 years earlier. "Captain, I know this isn't going to be easy," Harrison said, his voice carrying the weight of command responsibility. "The weather reports show possible wind shear in the target area, and we've got confirmed enemy presence within 500 meters of the landing zone. Are you and your crew ready for this?" Rodriguez nodded without hesitation. Sir, we've practiced this insertion 17 times in similar terrain. My crew knows what they're doing, and this bird has never let us down. We'll get your team in position and bring them home when the job is done. The 12 Special Forces soldiers who would be making the insertion were already suited up in their gear, checking weapons and communications equipment one final time. Rodriguez had worked with many elite units during her deployment, but this team had a reputation that preceded them. Led by Master Sergeant Carlos Vega, they had successfully completed over 40 high-risk operations without losing a single team member. Vega approached Rodriguez as his men finished their equipment checks. The veteran soldier's calm demeanor belied the intensity that had made him one of the most respected non-commissioned officers in the Special Forces community. His dark eyes held the kind of focus that came from years of operating in environments where split-second decisions meant the difference between life and death. "Captain, my team is ready to go," Vega reported. "We've studied the terrain maps and satellite imagery until we could navigate that mountain blindfolded. Once you get us to the insertion point, we'll need exactly 90 seconds on the ground to establish our position and begin moving toward the target." Rodriguez appreciated his directness. Working with Special Forces required a level of trust and communication that went beyond normal military protocols. These soldiers would be depending on her flying skills to get them safely into position, and she would be counting on their expertise to complete the mission successfully. The helicopter's turbine engines began their familiar whine as Rodriguez and her co-pilot, Chief Warrant Officer Michael Torres, ran through their pre-flight checklist. Torres had been flying helicopters for 12 years, with deployments in Iraq, Afghanistan, and several classified operations that he couldn't discuss even with his own crew. His steady hands and calm voice had guided them through numerous dangerous situations, and Rodriguez trusted his judgment completely. "All systems are green," Torres reported as he monitored the aircraft's instruments. "Fuel is topped off, navigation systems are locked onto our route, and communications are clear. Weather reports show some turbulence in the mountain passes, but nothing we can't handle." The sound of the engines reached full power as Rodriguez felt the familiar vibration of the aircraft preparing for flight. She glanced back at the Special Forces team, noting their professional composure despite the inherent dangers of the mission ahead. Each soldier had volunteered for this operation, knowing full well that they might not return. Staff Sergeant Chin's voice came through her headset as he completed his final safety checks. "Captain, all cargo is secure, weapon systems are operational, and the insertion team is ready for departure. We're good to go on your command." Rodriguez took a deep breath and keyed her radio. "Tower, this is Black Hawk 77, requesting permission for immediate departure. Mission Priority Alpha. Black Hawk 77, you are cleared for departure. Godspeed, and bring our boys home safe." The helicopter lifted off smoothly, rising above the airfield as Rodriguez banked toward the distant mountains. The landscape below changed from the flat desert terrain surrounding the base to increasingly rugged terrain as they approached their destination. Small villages dotted the valleys, their mud brick buildings blending seamlessly with the surrounding landscape. Torres monitored their progress on the navigation display, calling out waypoints and potential hazards as they flew deeper into hostile territory. The mountains grew progressively taller and more forbidding, their jagged peaks creating a maze of valleys and canyons that could easily hide enemy forces. 15 minutes to target, Torres announced. "Weather is holding steady, but we're starting to encounter some downdrafts from the mountain ridges. Nothing serious yet, but it's going to get more challenging as we get closer to the insertion point." Rodriguez felt the aircraft respond to the changing air currents, requiring constant adjustments to maintain their planned flight path. Flying in mountainous terrain demanded every ounce of her skill and experience, especially with the added pressure of enemy forces potentially watching their approach. Master Sergeant Vega moved forward from the passenger compartment, securing himself near the cockpit so he could observe their approach to the target area. His presence was reassuring to Rodriguez, as she knew he would spot potential threats or hazards that might not be immediately obvious to the flight crew. "Captain, I can see the target ridge ahead," Vega reported through the internal communication system. Intelligence was accurate about the terrain. "The insertion point looks like it's going to be tight, but Manageable. My team is ready to move as soon as you give us the signal. The Taliban stronghold came into view as they crested a particularly high ridge, revealing a series of cave openings and fortified positions carved into the mountainside. Rodriguez could see movement among the rocks, confirming that enemy forces were present and likely aware of their approach. Contact, 11 o'clock. Sergeant Washington called out from his position at the door gun. I count at least 6 enemy personnel moving between the cave entrances. They don't appear to have noticed us yet, but that's going to change real quick once we start our approach. Rodriguez felt her heart rate increase as the reality of the situation became clear. They were about to insert a special forces team directly into the middle of a heavily defended enemy position, with limited room for error and virtually no margin for safety. The narrow ledge that would serve as their landing zone was barely visible from their current position, appearing as little more than a dark shadow against the rock face. 2 minutes to insertion point, Torres announced, his voice remaining steady despite the mounting tension. I'm seeing some significant wind shear from the mountain peaks, but it looks manageable. The enemy position is approximately 300 meters from our target landing zone. Rodriguez began her descent toward the ledge, fighting the unpredictable air currents that threatened to slam them against the mountain face. The helicopter shuddered as it encountered pockets of turbulent air, requiring constant corrections to maintain control. Through her headset, she could hear the steady breathing of the Special Forces team as they prepared for what could be the most dangerous insertion of their careers. The ledge grew larger in her vision as they descended, revealing just how precarious their landing would be. The flat area was barely longer than the helicopter itself, with sheer drops on 3 sides and the mountain wall rising vertically behind it. A single mistake in positioning could send them tumbling thousands of feet into the valley below. 30 seconds, Rodriguez called out, her voice cutting through the sound of the engines and rotor blades. Stand by for insertion. Master Sergeant Vega's team rose from their seats in perfect synchronization, checking their weapons and equipment one final time before moving toward the aircraft's doors. Each soldier knew his role and position in the insertion sequence, eliminating any chance of confusion or delay during the critical moments on the ground. The helicopter touched down on the narrow ledge with barely inches to spare on either side. Rodriguez felt the aircraft settle onto the uneven rock surface, fighting to maintain stability in the swirling mountain winds that threatened to lift them off the precarious perch. Go, go, go! Vega shouted as his team poured out of the helicopter with practiced efficiency. Within seconds, all 12 soldiers had exited the aircraft and begun moving toward their predetermined positions among the rocks surrounding the landing zone. Rodriguez held the helicopter steady for exactly 90 seconds, watching through her peripheral vision as the Special Forces team established their initial defensive perimeter. The sound of gunfire erupted from the Taliban positions as enemy forces realized what was happening and began directing fire toward the insertion point. We're taking fire from multiple positions, Washington reported through the communications system. The team is clear of the aircraft and moving toward cover. Recommend immediate departure to avoid taking hits. Rodriguez pulled power and lifted the helicopter away from the ledge, banking sharply to put the mountain between them and the enemy positions. As they climbed away from the insertion point, she could see muzzle flashes from the Taliban stronghold where the battle was already beginning. The first phase of the mission was complete, but Rodriguez knew that getting the team out would be even more challenging than getting them in. The enemy would now be fully alert and prepared for their return, making the extraction a potentially deadly proposition. As they headed back toward the base to refuel and await the extraction call, Rodriguez reflected on the courage and professionalism of the soldiers they had just delivered into harm's way. Master Sergeant Vega and his team were now fighting for their lives in one of the most dangerous places on Earth, depending on precise timing and flawless execution to complete their mission and survive until pickup. The radio crackled to life as they approached the airfield. Black Hawk 77, this is base operations. Insertion successful, standing by for mission updates. Well done. Rodriguez acknowledged the transmission while Torres began their landing approach. They had successfully completed the most dangerous part of their mission, but She knew the real test would come when they returned to extract the Special Forces team from the heart of enemy territory. The helicopter touched down at the airfield as ground crews immediately began refueling and performing rapid maintenance checks. Rodriguez and her crew would use this time to review their approach routes and prepare for what promised to be an even more challenging flight back into the mountains. As she shut down the engines and completed her post-flight checklist, Rodriguez couldn't shake the image of Master Sergeant Vega and his team disappearing into the rocks above the insertion point. 12 brave soldiers were now deep in enemy territory, carrying out a mission that could change the entire dynamic of the ongoing conflict in the region. Staff Sergeant Chen approached her as she climbed out of the cockpit. "Captain, the bird performed flawlessly. No mechanical issues, no damage from the insertion. We'll be ready to go again as soon as you give the word." Rodriguez nodded, grateful for her crew's professionalism and dedication. "Outstanding work, Sergeant. Get some rest and grab some chow. Something tells me we're going to be making another trip into those mountains before this day is over." The waiting had begun, and with it came the knowledge that somewhere in the distant peaks, a small group of American soldiers was fighting to complete a mission that could determine the outcome of countless future operations. Rodriguez and her crew would be ready when the call came to bring them home.